The sun rose over the Bay of Naples in a golden haze, spilling light across marble streets and terracotta rooftops. In the heart of Pompeii, the marketplace was already alive. Merchants calling out their prices, the scent of fresh bread drifting from the bakeries, laughter echoing from the public baths. Wealthy Romans reclined in shaded courtyards, sipping wine cooled in clay jars, while children darted between the stalls, their sandals tapping against the stone. And above it all, silent and eternal, loomed the mountain. Mount Vesuvius, green slopes dotted with vineyards, its summit often shrouded in a thin veil of cloud. To the people of Pompeii, it was no more threatening than the sun itself, a fixture of the horizon, a guardian of their fertile lands. But that morning, as the city pulsed with life, the mountain was stirring. Some claimed they felt a faint tremor underfoot. Others noticed a strange taste in the air, sharp, metallic, unfamiliar. A dog refused to enter its master's home. A fisherman saw the water shift unnaturally in the harbor. Small things, easy to ignore. By nightfall, Pompeii would be gone. Not slowly, not in a way that allowed for goodbyes, but in a single, unrelenting cascade of fire, ash, and death. A moment when an empire's jewel was smothered and sealed away, as if time itself had drawn a curtain. For nearly 1,100 years, the city lay in darkness beneath the earth, its people forgotten. Yet when it was rediscovered, it was as though the Romans had simply stepped away. Loaves still in ovens, coins still in purses, expressions of fear and love etched forever in stone and ash. How could such a thriving city vanish in hours, and yet remain frozen for centuries? This is the story of the day Pompeii stood still. Pompeii was more than just a city. It was the playground of Rome's wealthy and the heart of a thriving province. Tucked along the shimmering Bay of Naples, it dazzled with white marble columns, painted frescoes, and bustling streets that smelled of olive oil, grilled fish, and ripe figs. From the harbor, ships arrived with goods from across the empire: Egyptian glass, Spanish olive oil, African ivory, all traded in the clamor of the Forum. Villas rose in graceful tiers along the slopes, their gardens blooming with roses, pomegranates, and lemon trees. In shaded courtyards, fountains whispered over marble basins while mosaics underfoot told stories of gods, heroes, and lovers. The walls were alive with color: crimson, ochre, deep sea blue. Each brushstroke a declaration of wealth and taste. Theaters and amphitheaters echoed with performance and spectacle. By day, citizens gathered to watch plays, gladiator matches, or orators sparring with words. By night, feasts spilled into the streets, wine flowing freely from amphorae, music drifting from taverns, and lanterns glowing like fireflies in the warm Mediterranean air. Everything in Pompeii seemed blessed, the land itself a giver of abundance. The soil, dark and rich, yielded grapes for some of the finest wines in the empire. Farmers boasted of harvests so plentiful they could export grain and fruit to Rome itself. Few paused to consider the source of this fertility, that it came from the mountain's ancient fire, from eruptions long before memory. To the people of Pompeii, Vesuvius was no monster. It was a silent benefactor, looming over their lives as a green, fertile presence. Children played in its shadow. Lovers strolled along the vineyards at its base. Its slopes gave them bread, wine, and beauty. And so, as the summer of AD 79 ripened into late August, life moved forward in its unbroken rhythm. Markets bustled, artists painted, sailors loaded cargo for the next voyage. The air was heavy with heat, but nothing in the city's pulse suggested that this day, like so many before it, would be anything but ordinary. The storm was coming. But for now, Pompeii basked in the golden light of a world that still believed it had tomorrow. For generations, Vesuvius had been little more than a green mountain, a silent sentinel above the bay. Its slopes were draped in vineyards and olive groves, its summit softened by centuries of peace. Children chased goats along its ridges, farmers carved terraces into its flanks, and poets compared its beauty to Olympus itself. The truth was, few in Pompeii could recall, or even imagine, its fury. The last great eruption had happened so long ago that it had passed from memory into myth. To most, Vesuvius was not a threat, but a landmark, a guardian whose stillness was proof of its gentleness. And yet, in the weeks before the fateful day, the mountain stirred. Almost imperceptibly, a faint shiver in the earth rattled amphorae in storerooms. Merchants grumbled as delicate glassware cracked on their shelves. Dogs barked at nothing, their ears twitching toward the mountain. Some mornings, a faint, acrid tang hung in the air, a whiff of sulfur that mingled strangely with the scent of ripening grapes. A few old fishermen swore they saw heat shimmer at the summit, even on cool evenings, but their warnings were waved away with laughter. Tremors, after all, were common in Campania. Life here had always danced with the earth. Nature's other signs were subtler still. A slight warmth in the springs, the sudden absence of certain birds that once nested on the slopes. In the vineyards, leaves curled strangely, their edges scorched though no fire had touched them. But the people of Pompeii had wine to press, markets to tend, debts to settle. They were Romans, pragmatic, grounded, and supremely confident in the permanence of their world. Whatever the mountain whispered, they chose not to listen. Vesuvius, for its part, said nothing more. It waited, as only a sleeping giant can, gathering its strength in the silence between heartbeats. The morning of August 24th, AD 79 began like any other. Sunlight spilled over the Bay of Naples, gilding the whitewashed villas and the mosaic courtyards of Pompeii. Merchants arranged their stalls in the forum, bakers slid fresh loaves into stone ovens, and children splashed in the public fountains. From the harbor, fishermen returning with their catch noticed something odd. Above Vesuvius, a narrow plume of smoke was rising, not lazily, like from a hearth, but straight up, as though drawn toward the heavens by some unseen force. By midday, the plume had grown monstrous, billowing high into the summer sky, its shape described later by Pliny the Younger. Like a pine tree, with a trunk of smoke and branches of ash spreading outward. Its base glowed faintly, as if lit from within, the column shifting from white to gray to a sickly brown. Then, like the first snow of winter, ash began to fall. At first, it was little more than a dusting, clinging to hair and tunics, collecting in the corners of shop counters. Children laughed and tossed handfuls into the air, delighting in the strange powdery rain. But the ash thickened quickly, turning the streets slippery, clogging the gutters, and dimming the afternoon light. A low rumble began to roll through the earth, not sharp like an earthquake, but deep and constant, a growl that seemed to come from beneath one's feet. Dogs howled, horses reared. The air grew heavier, harder to breathe. Some citizens, recalling old tales, began to pack hurriedly, gathering jewelry, coins, and bread. They hurried toward the gates, joining a growing stream of carts and frightened families heading inland. Others stayed. Many believed the spectacle would pass by nightfall, as storms so often did. They took shelter indoors, closing shutters against the ash, confident in their city's endurance. But far above them, at the summit of Vesuvius, the pine tree was only the first breath of something far greater. Deep inside the mountain, pressure was building, a force that had been waiting centuries for this moment. And with every passing minute, its patience was running out. By late afternoon, the ash was no longer a gentle drift. It was a blizzard of death. The sky, once blue, had turned the color of iron. Daylight was swallowed whole, and the streets of Pompeii fell into a shadow that felt like night. Then came the pumice. Light at first, it bounced harmlessly off tiled roofs and market awnings. But as the eruption's fury swelled, the stones grew heavier, falling in a relentless hail that thudded against wood and cracked terracotta. The noise was deafening, a constant drumbeat from the heavens. In the bakery on Via dell'Abbondanza, the owner shoved the last loaves into the oven before slamming the shutters. He wasn't thinking about bread anymore. He was thinking about keeping the roof from caving in. Upstairs, his wife was dragging heavy furniture into the center of the room, trying to brace it against the tremors. A family across town huddled in the atrium of their home, wrapping wet cloths over their mouths. Outside, the street they had walked that morning was already buried knee-deep in gray pumice. Every gust of wind sent clouds of ash billowing through doorways, coating statues, frescoes, and sleeping children alike. Down at the harbor, sailors clung to their ships, desperate to cast off. But the wind was fierce, and the waves slammed against the docks. Those who stayed on shore found themselves trapped as the falling stones made the roads impassable. The air stank of sulfur, so thick and hot it scalded the lungs. All through the city came the sounds of collapse. Roof beams groaned under the weight of accumulating debris, before splintering with a snap that echoed like gunfire. The basilica's grand columns shuddered. Smaller homes simply gave way, entombing those inside in an instant. Panic grew feral. Some citizens abandoned their shelters and tried to flee, covering their heads with cloaks or baskets, stumbling blindly through the choking darkness. Others prayed aloud, their voices muffled by the roar of the mountain. Above them, Vesuvius hurled its wrath without pause. Molten fragments and burning stones launched miles into the air before raining back upon the city. Every impact sent shivers through the earth. Every breath drew in more ash than air. The people of Pompeii had entered the long night, and though the eruption had not yet reached its deadliest phase, the city was already suffocating beneath a weight it could not bear. By the second morning, there was no dawn. The sun, hidden behind miles of volcanic ash, could no longer pierce the blackened sky. It was as if the world had been tipped into an endless eclipse, a choking, suffocating night, where the air itself seemed to burn. From the mountain came a new sound, deeper than thunder and more terrible than cannon fire. It was the sound of the earth tearing itself apart. The ground heaved and split, sending fissures through courtyards and market stalls. The few who still clung to the hope of escape felt it vanish in that instant. Then came the first surge. A wall of death, a pyroclastic cloud, rushed from Vesuvius at a speed no man could outrun. It was not smoke, but a searing avalanche of superheated gas and pulverized rock, hotter than any forge and heavier than the air itself. It poured through the streets, swallowing everything in its path. In a narrow alley, a young couple pressed together, their arms locked in a final embrace. Their bodies trembled, not from fear, but from the searing heat already curling the hair on their skin. At the city gates, a guard stood gripping his spear, staring toward the invisible horizon. He had been ordered to hold his post, but there was nothing left to defend. The roar grew louder, like the mountain itself was breathing down his neck. In the forum, a mother tried to shield her child, pressing the boy's face into her shoulder as she crouched beside a toppled column. She whispered promises she could not keep, that they would see the light again, that the storm would pass. The surge struck with the force of a hurricane and the heat of a furnace. Roofs exploded into flame, wood turned to embers, and flesh seared in an instant. Breath itself became impossible. The air was a weapon. There was no time for flight, no chance for rescue. Those who were standing fell where they were. Those who were kneeling became statues of ash. Lovers, warriors, mothers, children, all frozen in their final gestures, locked in a moment that would outlast empires. Above the city, Vesuvius roared again, sending another surge racing down its slopes. Pompeii's fate was sealed. The sky had fallen, and the city of life had become a city of ghosts. And then, it stopped. The mountain that had roared like an angry god now stood shrouded in its own creation. A smoking, ashen crown rising into a wounded sky. The air, though no longer alive with falling fire, was heavy and unbreathable, carrying the acrid sting of sulfur and the ghost of what had been. Where once Pompeii's streets bustled with vendors, laughter, and the rhythm of sandals on stone, there was only an unbroken blanket of gray. The city lay entombed beneath 15 to 20 feet of volcanic debris, roofs flattened, walls erased, alleyways swallowed whole. Not a single column pierced the surface. Out on the Bay of Naples, surviving sailors watched in stunned disbelief. The shoreline they had known, vibrant with villas, gardens, and bustling ports, had been forever reshaped. Landmarks had vanished. Even the gentle curves of the coast seemed alien, smothered under the mountain's wrath. In the nearby town of Stabii, survivors stood on rooftops and hillsides, staring toward the smoking wasteland. Some wept openly. Others simply stared, too hollow for tears. They whispered the names of loved ones who had not returned, their voices lost in the still, oppressive air. Birdsong was gone. The chatter of markets was gone. Even the wind seemed to hesitate, as if unwilling to disturb the grave. It was not the quiet of peace, but the silence of absence, the kind that settles after life has been stripped away. Pompeii no longer breathed. It waited, buried and forgotten, beneath the weight of its own tragedy. Only the mountain remained awake, smoldering like a sentinel over the city it had claimed in a single merciless day. For nearly 17 centuries, Pompeii lay hidden beneath its gray tomb, its name whispered only in old maps and half-forgotten tales. Then, in 1748, workmen digging near the Bay of Naples struck something unexpected. Not stone, but walls, frescoes, pottery. They had stumbled upon a city not in ruins, but intact, as if time itself had been sealed away. As excavations began, the scale of the discovery stunned the world. Streets were uncovered just as they had been that final day, wine jugs still on counters, loaves of bread carbonized in ovens, dice scattered on gaming tables mid-throw. But the most haunting revelations came when archaeologists noticed strange hollow spaces in the hardened ash. Giuseppe Fiorelli, in the 1860s, had the idea to pour liquid plaster into these voids. When the hardened casts were lifted from their ashen molds, human forms emerged, not bones, but people. A mother shielding her child. A man curled on his side, his hand over his mouth. Lovers locked in a final embrace. The plaster had captured the instant of death. Clothes, expressions, even the folds of their skin preserved. It was as if the volcano had not merely destroyed life, but pressed pause on it. The city's walls spoke too. Vibrant frescoes depicted gods, banquets, and myths in colors that still burned bright. Graffiti scrawled on plaster revealed the humor, politics, and private desires of its citizens. Each detail, a wine stain on a mosaic floor, a broken lyre in a villa corner, told a story left mid-sentence. Visitors to Pompeii today walk those same streets, their footsteps echoing against stones worn smooth by Roman sandals. But it is the faces in plaster, caught mid-breath and mid-movement, that stay with them. They are a reminder that this was not simply an ancient tragedy. It was the sudden silencing of thousands of individual lives. Pompeii had been resurrected, but only as a ghost of itself, forever frozen in the moment the sky fell. Pompeii is more than a ruin. It is a mirror, one that reflects not only the lives of those who perished, but also our own fragile place in time. The city's tragedy was absolute, yet its preservation is a rare gift. Through its streets, frescoes, and silent figures, we can see the rhythm of a day 2,000 years past, captured forever in the moment it ended. It is tempting to think of Pompeii as a relic of another world, distant, untouchable. But the truth is far more unsettling. Every thriving city today, with its crowded markets, laughter-filled homes, and busy harbors, stands beneath its own unseen shadow. Disasters come without warning, and history has shown how quickly the familiar can vanish. Imagine your own life paused mid-breath, your hands mid-task, your words unfinished, your world unchanged, but for the silence. This is the gift and the warning Pompeii offers us, to cherish the present, for it is never guaranteed. If this story moved you, share it so history is never forgotten. Because in remembering Pompeii, we remember what it means to be human, and how quickly time can hold its breath again.